And we are live right now. We are live. Welcome. Welcome to the art stream, which we're gonna start with a nice fanfare from one of my favorite games, Lunar 2. You know Lunar, the game? The RPG Lunar 2, Eternal Blue. Lunar 2. Hello, fake Alec Kyle Parker, and Boy Meets Meanie, and Good for Gabby, and of course, Jess. Of course. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're doing an art stream combined with reacting. So today, I am accepting orders for emotes that we'll be putting to the page, as well as I'm gonna accept your requests as to the videos that we're gonna react to. It's true, we have started. I think we might as well kick things off with the Vosh thing, right? We're gonna stop the nice little fanfare. The fanfare is over. Now we're going into the hell of pro-Russian propaganda. Oh, well, you're gonna learn all about him today because we're gonna watch this debate that has been put on the Vosh Pit. That's the name of the channel, right? The Vosh Pit. So we're gonna check that out first. And we're gonna see how the arguments go. Although all of those pro-Russian people use the same arguments, we can actually start a bingo based on the whole. Okay, I'm gonna new page, YouTube. I'm gonna make some predictions for this debate. Anna Kasparian leads the left. Anna Kasparian, the whole Anna Kasparian thing is so horrible, so, dare I say, cringe. Maybe I should comment on it. I don't. Well, maybe we'll get to it later. Now we click on the Vosh Pit.
Whoa, a cutaway?
Whoa. Whoa. Debating a viewer who thinks Putin can be reasoned with. That's great. I bet this person will say, I'm gonna make a little bit of a list of things that well, at least I think this person's gonna be talking about. I bet this person's gonna fearmonger about World War III. I bet this person's gonna say that Ukraine does not want peace, that Zelensky is like a warmonger. What else? Protecting the Russian people in Ukraine. Keep an eye out for those arguments. Yeah, Anna Kasparin is tripling, quadrupling down, and Cenk Uygur is also like very weird about the whole thing. I have no idea. But Cenk Uygur is like basically doing the same thing, right? think he's acting even worse than her about the whole thing. If I'm not mistaken from the clips that I've seen, I think the Young Turks might end up mending the bridge between Xander Hall and Lance from the Serfs. Because for some reason Xander Hall dislikes Lance, but the Young Turks have attacked Lance from the Serfs over this whole thing. And Xander Hall has tweeted that it's a rare Lance W. What is your opinion on the Serbs? I was under the impression that the Serbs, that Lance was pretty okay, but yes, Cenk describing against Lance. It's really strange, really weird. Why does Xander Hall dislike Lance? Yeah. Wait, transphobic against Lance? That's strange. Lance is not trans. Right. I've watched a few things from Lance, and I think people were a bit overly harsh. I don't think Lance's debate with Lauren Sovereign went as bad as people say it did. But okay, let's get into this. I've already given you a whole list of things that I believe this person is gonna tell Vosh. I've already told you that we're gonna probably be hearing about World War III or the Azov Battalion, of course. You know? Yeah, when he called out Lance at the end of the sentence, he said brother or sister, whatever your gender is. Wow. That is so weird. Aren't the Young Turks supposed to be a progressive network or something? Wait, can you hear?
I'm really nervous, which combines great with the clock being 04:30 in the
What?
morning, so that's fun.
Wait, where are you? What's your time zone?
I'm in Norway.
Oh, oh, you're right next to Finland, the newest anarcho-NATOist edition.
True.
Yeah, NATO member, it's correct.
Yeah, well,
So yeah,
don't worry, chat's full of anxiety disorders as well. Just name, pronouns, and what do you want to talk about?
oh yeah, my name is Are. It is like ARE.
Why does a person from Norway want to debate Vosh about the war in Ukraine? Is my biggest question. Also, hello, Maya. Hello, Maya Major, or as I would pronounce it in Polish, Maya Major. Which one do you like more? Maya Major or Maya Major? Is my question to you.
Yeah, like it's I want to talk about a bit of different concepts, I guess. So one thing is like your comprehension of international politics theories, and I remember watching your video on Mersheimer, and
Oh no, you don't understand theory. You don't understand theory as deep as I do. Read theory, Vosh. You don't understand international theory.
I think you kind of misunderstood what Mersheimer's goals and generally ideas were. In addition to that, I think your uh, and your comprehension of the different players' goals in Ukraine is somewhat wrong, or at least your rhetoric makes it seem like you have somewhat of a misunderstanding.
All right,
Oh
well, hit
yeah.
me up.
So,
What do you
and
think I
for
got wrong? I
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Okay, we will see if we're gonna be hit by a collection of cliches from pro Russia shells. Hello, Jacob. Welcome. Welcome to this wonderful stream. We are making. Okay, this is the plan. Okay, we are chilling here. We are listening to a Vosh debate and we are doing art. But at any moment, you can request an emote that you want me to add to the page. And when you do, I will draw it on stream. You don't really have to donate to ask for an emote for the page, but it would be really nice if you did. But for now, just ask for an emote that you think we need to have on the page, and then I will start working on it while we react to the debate. How does that sound? Doesn't that sound like super, what's the word? Oh my gosh, I'm trying to think of the word. Productive. Productive time. So we're gonna try to have a. No, we're not gonna try. Do or do not do. There is no try. We're gonna have a very productive time today. So let us unpause. Vosh. Is Vosh being a bit too small? There you go. I am uncluttering the chat. I made Vosh a bit bigger.
Obey!
.ice. Oh, thank you for the $12, fake Alec Kyle Parker. Personally, I think you should add something with .eyes. So with dots instead of eyes, right? What sort of emotion should this emote have?
dislike
I think
Mearsheimer
that's a
very
good idea.
much, so I'm opposed to pretty much
yeah,
everything he said.
I'm no fan of Mercenary myself. So yeah, and so if it comes to Mersheimer,
Okay, let's do it. So before we continue, I'm gonna set up the. We're gonna do a whole system. Okay? We're gonna do it through a system. In other words, I'm gonna draw the emote on stream. And if we decide that we like the emote, then we will keep it. If we decide that we hate the emote, then I will try again. Hello, J Spoon. Kek W, but with a duck face. Okay, that will be the next one. The first one will be confusion with dot eyes. The second will be KW, but with duck face. Okay. So we have a lineup of emotes, and we are returning to Vosh, who we have established does not like Russia. Because who does, right? Who does?
For example, so Mersheimer seems to the regular person as a pro-Russian like intellectual. Although, if you really go into Mersheimer's work, when he says, for example, abandon Ukraine to Russia because that's within the Russian sphere of influence, what he wants to achieve is, or he thinks that's a good thing for the U.S., not because it's good for Russia. So he wants the U.S. to kind of own almost the entirety of Europe as a sphere of influence, and from there he believes that makes America safer, and of course, as a byproduct, Russia safer. But primarily for Mersheimer, giving up Ukraine is in America's interest, and you can debate
Do
that.
you know do you know what makes me really annoyed in these sort of discussions? Do you know what makes me really annoyed in these sort of discussions? When people speak of the US interest, Russian interest, and not really take into consideration nor care about the interest of the country that's being devastated and the citizens of which are being basically genocided. Nobody even mentions the interest of Ukraine because I guess Ukraine is just a pawn in a game between the US and Russia, and discussing its interest or its self-determination is not really relevant, right? And I should add, this is a thing that pro-Russian shills usually do, because I am fairly certain that Vosh I have faith that Vosh is going to, point out that what Ukraine wants matters a whole lot, right? It's not just a game of chess between Russia and the US. So I've told you what annoys me. No, those people don't care. I'm gonna read your question. Have these people even thought of what will happen to Ukraine and her people should Putin win? Just give up Ukraine's sovereignty? What's that? Yeah.
That's what his goals are.
I mean, yeah, it seems like a pretty like transparently dishonest way of promoting Russian interests, you know?
True.
Like, oh yeah, actually it's in America's best interest to just abandon all of our allies, all of our trade deals, all of our relationships, and allow
True.
this weak, broken country of Russia to just arbitrarily take over Europe for some reason.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the stuff he said seems like totally indefensible outside the context of just dishonestly promoting Kremlin's geopolitical goals.
Yeah. I agree.
I mean, to an extent, yeah, I don't completely disagree. I don't want the world Mersheimer wants to build either. I am an anarcho-syndicalist as well, so I'm not a fan. But that is the like.
Oh no. Anarcho-syndicalist. Oh no. I don't know what to expect.
His interests are not Russia's well-being; it's the United States' well-being, and as well, like in the same convo. I don't want to switch topics completely, but about Mersheimer as well. For example, when you said that Mersheimer pretended to be objective or amoral because he's a realist. What realists believe is not that actions are amoral, like if some country invades, it's whatever, but that states act amoral. Like, for example, the United States doesn't intervene in Ukraine because it cares about Ukrainians. It intervenes in Ukraine because right now the administration views that as their own best.
Yeah. I don't care why the US helps Ukraine. I don't care why the whole of the West helps Ukraine. The fact is that the US is helping Ukraine. That's it. Ukraine needs help and is getting the help. I don't really care if the US is doing it from the kindness of its heart, or if the US is doing it for, calculated reasons. Right? I don't think it's a controversial statement in the slightest.
Political interests.
Yeah, but nobody disagrees with that. Like,
Yeah,
there
nobody
no
cares.
reasonable
Nobody
no
cares.
reasonable like geopolitical speaker would say, yeah, well, the US's foreign policy goals are being dictated by humanitarian interest. Like, that's just not. I don't disagree with that, but he was making
but
the argument that
nobody-
his
Yeah, we don't disagree with that, nor frankly do we care in this case, right?
assessment of geopolitical priorities is
come
based on
on.
some kind of like objective reading of the situation. The idea that geopolitical or geographic proximity is what dictates what should or should not be a country's sphere of influence, which I think is total bullshit. I think that's incomprehensible.
True.
I think it's comprehensible. Like, in the school of political realism, that is basically what they want to design the world as.
Yeah, and I think they're
Although I disagree
insane.
that it's morally wrong, I completely agree. But that is what they believe.
Well, but it's what they believe, but that doesn't mean it's objective. I think they've completely made that up. When he says like,
True.
"Oh yeah, Ukraine belongs to Russia naturally as a property of it being adjacent to Russia," I think that's completely
Nonsense.
nonsensical.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, not naturally in the way
It's also false historically speaking. Let's not mince words around that. It's also historically false.
that that's the way it's going to be forever, because like all countries die eventually. So I mean, but in the current like political climate, yeah, that's all.
Countries are not living organisms, so countries do not quote unquote die.
I would believe. No, that's great. I think maybe the way you talked about it made me kind of misunderstand it, possibly. But obviously, Mersheimer isn't the most important thing. It's just that I felt like you kind of misunderstood the concept of political realism.
Well, I mean, I
don't
think they misunderstand it, if anything, or I think they deliberately misframe what they believe in a way to make it seem as though they're adhering to some kind of like neutral system-driven assessment of how we're supposed to understand geopolitics, when in reality they're engaging in like extremely preferential bias towards Russia.
True.
I don't think Mersheimer is preferential towards Russia. I just think that's what he believes that U.S. involving itself in Ukraine is kind of like misguided from a U.S. strategic perspective.
Well,
that the U.S. is better using their resources within their own sphere of influence, and that will bring like more peace, I guess.
Well, yeah, but it's for
Hello.
5% of our military budget. We're supporting an ally against a fascist invasion.
Hello, Neil Shadaka. Neil Shadaka.
Your
Yeah.
military budget is insane, but
agree.
yeah, I agree with supporting.
I'm sorry, what?
Well, your military budget is insane, but yeah, I agree
Yeah,
with
okay.
supporting Ukraine. I don't disagree morally on that, but that's like realism is rather about peace through spheres of influence, if you get me.
Yeah,
Oh.
I completely disagree. Spheres of influence don't matter anymore. We live in a global, connected world. Like,
True.
as far as I'm concerned,
I
my
don't
sphere of
know.
influence as an American is the world. It doesn't even end at the borders of space. The universe is ours.
True.
And if people want to work with us and get along with us, then it's ours collectively together. But I don't buy this like I have a set of morals and political values that get contained to Western countries, but then Russia gets to fuck over the ones near them. You know, we're all in this together. Like we can all connect to each other. If we had an
True.
interplanetary, species or whatever, and it was like, okay, we literally can't do anything about what's going on Mars, then okay, like maybe you could make an argument there. But we have the ability to reinforce Ukraine within, like 24 hours. The
True.
economy is global at this point. Feel like we're all in this together, you know?
We are. See, Vosh is making great arguments as always. This is why Vosh is good. Vosh is not bad. Vosh is good. That just sounds like manifested destiny. Do those duckers not understand that if we weren't supporting Ukraine, the money would either go to Wall Street, the super rich, or Saudi Arabia, not the American people? True. Ridiculous. Yeah, he's good on this. Sorry for the bottle sounds. But don't worry, some new static's gonna get rid of it. The other guy's alright? Well, we'll see, won't we? He's not being alright so far.
Well, the economy is getting less globalized by the day at the current state, but yeah, I don't disagree that's the way it should be. But for example, well, nobody's threatened the U.S. spheres of influence lately, but the last time, for example, when Russia was, or the Soviet Union was having fun in Cuba, the U.S. almost blew up the world, right? I mean, yes, it shouldn't be relevant in a globalized world where the fuck your country's placed, right?
The Cuban Missile Crisis, was it about the US almost blowing up the world or the USSR almost blowing up the world? I'm not entirely sure. Right? I think the Cuban Missile Crisis was more than just the US almost blowing up the world.
You didn't exactly choose it. But the fact still remains as that as far as leaders and as far as governments and the bureaucracies believe that they have a sphere of influence, that will be relevant. I'm sorry if my English is fucked up, man. I'm a bit nervous and it's my second language.
Your English isn't fucked up, but you're perfectly understandable. And
Okay, great.
no, I mean, I'm not defending, like any kind of military engagement around the world or exacerbating military conflicts the way that we did with, the Cuban Missile Crisis. I just don't think that's applicable in a context where Russia's the one that started this war.
Oh, that's true. I mean, Russia started this war and they want to do so. But what I'm trying to say is as long as countries think that they have a sphere of influence, I don't say that you just surrender Ukraine, but it is something that has to be taken into consideration when making foreign policy decisions, right? For example, if the United States, I don't know, somehow disarm North Korea's nukes and invade North Korea, it would probably be a good thing to get rid of the worst country in the history of the planet, right? But you will still have to expect a harsh reaction from China because they consider their sphere of influence, even though they don't even like the North Korean regime themselves.
Yeah, but in this case, all we're doing is supplying military equipment to an allied country against an invasion, which that's not like an escalation or anything. That's a pretty normal extension of our policy. Just, kind of what we always have done. It's a pretty normal thing to do, to give arms to allied countries who are being invaded. And that's why we're not getting directly involved, right? Like, NATO soldiers are not in Ukraine right now, because that could constitute an actual escalation.
Right.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like,
Hey, maybe Russia shouldn't be a fascist regime attacking first. True.
yes.
Maybe Russia should not be doing what Russia has been doing for hundreds of years.
Like NATO soldiers going in would be at like World War III starts now. Obviously, that hasn't happened, but obviously you are on a side, or we, I guess, because I'm in NATO too. We are on a side of the conflict, and
Although keep in mind that the recent US intelligence leaks have apparently disclosed that there are some foreign troops in Ukraine. The US has stated that the troops are not fighting in the war, but the troops apparently are there.
we are participating in the conflict. For example, if Russia were to like pile Iraq full of weapons when the Americans invaded, Russia would be sanctioned to oblivion, right? Like the reaction would be harsh. It wouldn't just be, "Oh, we're just helping a friend." No, I mean obviously the reaction would be brutal against Russia at that time.
Yeah, well, but that's what happens, right? Like we've participated in military actions before that have been indirectly, like the opposition has been indirectly supplied by Russia. I don't think you
Yeah,
could.
like Vietnam.
Yeah, well, I mean, even more recently, right? Like with Syria. Um, but I don't think you could then go like that means it's direct warfare. Countries supply allied countries with arms all the time. It's a pretty normal, you know, like if that's off the table, if that constitutes escalation, then it basically means that like there is no such thing as international engagement in conflict.
Well, I think I agree with that. But on thing when you mentioned Syria, Syria is almost a perfect analogy, right? Because that was the United States invading a Russian ally while the Russians were supporting them.
Well, we supported.
Um,
I mean, invasion's kind of tricky, right? Like portions of Syria are basically not even Syria anymore. Like portions of
Well, we'll see. We are still pretty early in the debate, so we'll see, we'll see.
Eastern Syria are like Rojava territory, and we sent troops to support them. Um, but also, like Russia initially just provided arms, but then they directly invaded themselves. So it's like there's this blurry line here. But I really don't think that providing arms to Ukraine constitutes the kind of escalation that a lot of people claim it does. I think it's a pretty bog standard
No
approach, you know?
spoilers.
well, yeah, but a point where about what you just said, for example, yes, the United States sent troops into Rojava, which was an independent. Almost all of my friends are Kurds, and I'm an anarchist, so Rojava is deeply in my heart. But say, for example, yes, the United States sent troops and weapons into Rojava, which was an autonomous region of.
Okay, what do you think of this emote? Good or no good? Vote in both chats. Do you like this emote or not? Do we like this emote or not very much? This is a confused emote. You should make them a bit darker. Maybe I should. The eyes. I can just redo the eyes. more of a cat mouth. Wait. Maybe even do we want cat mouth or right? If you want a cat mouth or not.
Syria or a de facto separate state. You could say the same about Eastern Ukraine, but you would still say that Russia invaded Ukraine, even though there were an active civil war, and there were there were actual Ukrainian citizens who revolted there. How many were Russian mercenaries? I have no idea, and we probably won't for a while. But you could make the same argument on Russia's side until 2022, of course.
Well, yeah, in that case, I would argue based mostly on moral grounds. But Ukraine has always had the right to defend itself, and I feel
On the
we've
moral
always had
grounds,
the...
I agree with you, by the way.
Well, then why shouldn't we support Ukraine? I guess is my question.
I have never said that you shouldn't support Ukraine. I guess if you go into the deeper contents of the emails, I didn't argue that we shouldn't support Ukraine. One, we should enter negotiations with Russia about Ukraine, or
This guy is just trying to what about himself out of this, you see?
we should help Ukraine in the negotiations. Obviously, we can't negotiate on their behalf, but we shouldn't actively try to block negotiations, or the US and Britain shouldn't actively try to block negotiations.
Well, what do you mean we should negotiate? And in what way are we blocking negotiations?
Right.
Oh, for example,
I hardcore disagree with the whole we should negotiate and we're blocking negotiation, whatever that means. When people say we should negotiate, it basically means Ukraine should just give something up. That is what it means. It means Ukraine should either give up territory, it should give up people, whatever. Ukraine just should give something up, which is like, no. Russia will not agree to any negotiation that will not involve Ukraine giving something up, and Ukraine will not agree to a negotiation that involves Ukraine giving something up. This is the reality. And when most people say negotiation, we are blocking negotiation, it literally in this case means that Ukraine should give something up. And since the US is supporting Ukraine, it means Ukraine can defend itself and doesn't need to give anything up. So it doesn't need to do this sort of thing. You know? That is also the reality of it. It's fairly simple. Like, what's happening now, it's not something new. It's not like something that, like, we have hundreds of years of precedent for how Russia operates.
The famous Boris Johnson intervention, and there has been numerous reportings on the United States
We don't
actively
live
trying
in
to
a
prevent
vacuum.
Ukraine from negotiating.
Space.
Well,
This is the start of the conflict.
in what way?
So, in diplomatic ways, first of all, or primarily in diplomatic ways, but that also goes over to the military, right? As if the support from NATO into Ukraine stops, Ukraine is done within a week or so. They don't have the ammunition, and they don't have the capacity to produce their own ammunition, as every factory is getting bombed, right?
But like, how have we tried to block negotiations?
Well, Boris Johnson's actively encouraged them not to negotiate, and you can say that it's just recommendations, but when it's the recommendation of the guy keeping you alive, you listen, right?
Well, okay, but that just makes it seem like there's nothing...
There you go. He just said it. if it's a recommendation of a person that's keeping you alive, this is basically saying we are keeping you alive, so you better give something up or you will be left with nothing because we are the ones keeping you alive. This is what the person is saying quite directly.
Like any person from the West saying, here's what I think you should do, instantly that becomes like a threat, you know? I don't
Yep.
really think that's fair. I mean, if that's the
It
case,
It does
then
become a threat, literally. It literally does. You better give something up, because if you don't give something up, then we will withdraw support and you will be left with nothing instead of maybe something.
it seems like there's literally nothing anyone from the West could really do to offer their opinion on the subject. Maybe Boris Johnson was just saying, don't negotiate, because like Putin famously negotiates in bad faith and lies and breaks deals and treaties and contracts all the time. And there's not really a point in negotiating with him because, you know, he's not like he's the one invading, you know? It's not like they're both in a mutual conflict or anything. Russia's in their territory. If
True.
Putin wants to end the war, he can just leave Ukraine.
Yep.
Yeah, we both know that's like not technically, practically impossible, right? For Putin himself, like he'd be gone. His regime would collapse instantly if he had just.
There we go. Let's try out the new emote. But yeah, Vosh is completely correct here. It's just a threat. Saying something like we're keeping you alive, so you better listen to us when it comes to the negotiation. If Ukraine wins, then Father Russia loses and America bad because America bad. True. So we have added a new emote. And I want you to judge if it's good or not. I think Leon is okay. We're gonna play as him soon. Leon is an okay dude. So they used to just strong arm Ukraine into negotiating. Oh, it is what this person seems to think. Certainly. But yeah, Leon is okay. We're still playing Resident Evil 1, mind you. Chris's scenario. So yeah. True. So what do you think of the emote? Does it work? Or vote? Vote if the emote is good or not. I need your opinions. I need everyone to chip in. Alright. The person that has given the dono in order to make this emote happen likes it. So now it's time to do the next one. You're biased. I mean, if you didn't like it, then I just make a new one. As in, I'd try to make it better. Okay, Kek W, but with duck face. What is Kek W again? Oh, this is going to be challenging. You know what? I welcome the challenge.
Just pulled out
Well,
Afghanistan style.
it needs to. His regime is like a brutal propaganda driven oligarchy.
True.
That
It
like
needs
he
to
took
fall.
like the country was nominally democratic when the Russian Federation came about, and he's a warmongering fascist. Like, okay, that's my point then. Like, there's
There's
no
a very interesting documentary making the case that Putin taking over
way like negotiating with him will
Russia is basically the KGB taking over Russia for all intents and purposes. And I agree with that assessment.
do anything right now because
So
he wouldn't even accept any terms that would be acceptable to Zelensky.
True.
so while like Russia today is the leading force of fascism in Europe with their support of other fascist parties, I don't disagree with that. But like a conflict ends in I guess one out of three ways. Either they end with negotiation, annihilation, or a forever war, kind of like we have seen in Georgia, where Russia just keeps peace in a corner of the country where there are separatists, right? Keep peace, a silly word, but you know what I mean.
No, I hard disagree. Ukraine is nothing like Georgia. Like this person might be in a relatively close country, in a country relatively close to Ukraine, but this person seems to like have no clue. Ukraine is nothing like Georgia. I'm sorry. This is just ridiculous. One moment. Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought. That's what I thought. That's what I thought. Um, Georgia is like not 70,000 square kilometers, while Ukraine is 600,000 square kilometers. Okay? Like, it's really silly to compare Georgia to Ukraine and to claim that their situation is basically no, 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 no.
So, and right now, like the US isn't pushing for either of those, right? So today, I think the left's goal should be a negotiation in Ukraine's favor, and it would be hard to predict. Like most realistically, the coming Ukrainian offensive is going to determine how those would look. But like pushing Russia out until the 1991 borders is a pipe dream for the most part, and the longer this war goes out, the worse it is for mostly Ukraine, as Russia has the industry to practically stay in there almost forever, as so long
Well,
as they keep trade open with China and India.
that's not true. Russia is definitely not like weathering this completely neutrally, but it's
Well, they do have the capacity to be in the war for years. Oh, the comparison is basically that Mhm. Russia has the capacity to just perpetually keep a conflict in Ukraine by, having some separatist forces there. Like, Ukraine is not Georgia. It's not like Georgia is really small, so it's a totally different thing to conquer Georgia and to conquer Ukraine. That's one thing. The comparison would make just as much sense if they compare Georgia the country to Georgia the state. True. Like, I don't like this.
It sounds like what you're like. Why can't we just allow Ukraine to win? Just
True.
continue to push forward. It'll take a while, sure, but I don't think that makes it like a negative thing to push for.
And Poland is basically like the, how do you call it? I'm gonna tell you the word. Oh my god, that's not what I want. I guess Poland, you could say, is like the support zone of Ukraine, where the families can safely live, and and the hub through which supports comes through from other
Maybe
places
the
as
long
well.
haul is the correct one here.
Yeah.
The alternative is basically just allowing Russia to conquer territory and people, without reprisal.
Yeah.
Well, the reprisal Russia have faced
And
is
keep in mind, if Russia was allowed to conquer territory in Ukraine, Russia would just make peace for a bit, and you know what? Sometimes later, Russia would just continue and invade again and get more territory until there would be no more Ukraine. Hello, Ellen Degenerate. Hello, Ellen. Look, I have a page now. I have a page now. Okay? Reminder for anyone who just came here. We are making art. We are reacting to videos. And right now, I am doing emotes for that you are all asking for, okay? I am fulfilling commissions for emotes. So if you want a specific emote, tell me and I will make your emote dreams come true and I will add it right away to the page. This is the CACW Duck Edition. Alright? Alright.
they have already faced a reprisal and they will continue to face the reprisal of this war, right? So sanctions, although they haven't been as effective against Russia as they have been against other countries that have been in place on, just because Russia is a food and gas producer, so they're pretty self-reliant. But in addition to that, they have lost a huge amount of hardware and men. So even though Russia can maintain a 1914 style war for an insane amount of time, it's no doubt that they have seen that military engagement will give the ire of.
Thank you so much for donating $5. Oh, I will do it, okay? We have a banner now. And yes, it is that Ellen. It is that Ellen DeGenerate that has been famous for many, many things. It is that Ellen. It is the Ellen. And yes, we will do it. We have added the YouTube banner and we can add this as well.
The West, right? So I think that negotiations is necessary because I don't think Ukraine can win. And even if Ukraine does win as it stands today, which would take probably years, but we will see how effective the new NATO equipment and training are.
Well, then why not?
Ukraine, like Ukraine after this war, if it wins, say it protracts the war for one more year and it wins, it would probably be in a worse situation than it was in 2013 for maybe 100 years due
No.
to a few
Nope.
reasons.
I don't know.
disagree.
That's not true. Ukraine is
I disagree because just as countries are investing into Ukraine when it comes to it defending itself, so will countries invest when it comes to the rebuilding of Ukraine. Like there's no doubt about it. Already, for example, Poland and Ukraine are literally talking about rebuilding the country. So, no, like it won't take 100 years. And yes, I think it's that, Ellen.
Is way stronger right now than it was a decade ago. The idea that like prolonged conflict would lead to them. No, they're making deals with the EU. When the conflict with Russia is over, they're going to open like a fully operational like EU market. There are huge tracts of land and natural resources in Ukraine. I don't think there's Ukraine stands to benefit at all from like bringing this to a quick closer.
So
Like the international community is already making plans on rebuilding Ukraine. So no, this is a totally false argument.
there's a few things.
Hello,
For example,
Jabatida.
Ukraine. Remember that most of the aid that goes to Ukraine isn't giving things to Ukraine; it's lending things. So Ukraine will be in huge amount of debt that, unlike the US, its economy just can't sustain like economic superpower can. As well as that, huge amount of Ukraine has been devastated. High industrial areas, like for example Mariupol, practically doesn't exist anymore, and a lot of its food producing is also extremely damaged. Like,
Then we'll
I'm not
support
sure
them.
if you are
Yeah.
aware of Peter Sion.
We'll support them. If there's economic damage, that's that's to be expected.
There are already
Then I'll support
plans.
whatever level of economic engagement is necessary to bring them up to where they need to be. I mean,
True.
Ukraine was doing pretty terribly back in 2014 after Euromaidan as well, so it's not like they had like a thriving industrial base to begin with. But I feel like what all you're doing right now is like apologia for the invasion, basically,
Yeah.
where it's like,
That's right.
Russia's done a lot of damage or whatever, but Ukraine's kind of fucked anyway. So might as well just cut things off now and give Putin the concession he wants, when we both know damn well that if they concede to Putin, he'll just invade them again like 2 years from now.
True. See, great minds think alike. Okay, great minds think alike. I just said it would happen, and a few moments later, Vosh says it would happen as well. And it's not because I'm some sort of a genius. It's because it's obvious. It's because we know how Russia operates.
Well, again, I'm not advocating concessions. I'm advocating negotiations. For example, I would never tell Ukraine that you just agree to Russia's like peace terms, right? A negotiation goes back and forth. It's not a one-way thing.
What could they possibly? Well, Putin has the Kremlin has specifically said that they're not willing to have negotiations with nothing on the table, and their precondition.
Exactly. So they will demand some sort of like, they will demand that Ukraine gives something up, territory. Like it's obvious, of course.
Require Ukraine to not join NATO, not join the EU, and remain neutral between Russia and the West.
Yeah.
So
And give up
So
some
not joining-
territory.
There are steps you can take to ensure Ukraine's safety without joining NATO. A basic security guarantee would practically do that, right?
Oh, wait. Basic security guarantee. Do you mean like when Russia promised the integrity of Ukrainian borders when Ukraine gave up its nukes? Do you remember something like that happening? Yeah, I remember that happening. Yeah, those safety guarantees don't mean anything. That is why joining NATO is the best option, because those empty safety guarantees are meaningless. You know? It's just meaningless. And I think we all agree that it's pretty meaningless.
So the difference between a security guarantee and NATO membership is that you wouldn't have American and British, French, German troops in Ukraine.
Thank you.
That's like a
Thank you for the tier 1 subscription, Jazz. Thank you very much.
step. And when it comes to, for example, like silly stuff like denazifying or whatever, like sure you can disband the right sector party, which would basically give Putin the propaganda when he would need. Now again, I'm obviously not a diplomat working in Russia at the time, so it's impossible to like make out the exact terms of what a deal would be.
They don't.
And
They
you
don't
don't
want a
even have to
military agreement either. They want total neutrality from Ukraine, which means
True.
like no military agreements whatsoever with the West. They want demilitarization. They're basically just saying if we cut things off now, we just want Ukraine to weaken itself so we can invade it again.
Yep, and
Next
take it over. Exactly. For someone that lives so much further from Ukraine and Russia, Vosh seems to have a much better grasp on those things than this person. Right?
Here, all of these are preconditions for engagement. These are the starting requirements that Russia's making. There's no point in negotiating when Russia's opening position is, yeah, you basically just have to be our vassal state and we can invade you
True.
again at will. Like, what sane country would ever agree to those terms?
No sane country would, and no sane country should, including Ukraine.
I wouldn't
Exactly.
advocate for Ukraine to agree with those either, but
But
Russia has been willing.
okay. Now we're gonna judge the new emote. How do you like the Duck Kek W? I'm pretty happy with the Duck Kek W. I think it sort of captures the spirit of the original thing. I think it does. What do you think? How do you like it? I think we're liking that. I think it's a. I think you use it when something really hilarious happens. Because it's the equivalent of this. Is the Kek W even here? You know the KW emote? You know the KW emote? This is it. Like, you know, this emote. Like, I just made the duck equivalent of this.
Oh, Barry!
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, J Spoon, for the $10. Incredible, KW. Yeah, I think it sort of captures the spirit of the original. Okay, so what is the next emote that you wish to see as we continue listening to the debate? What sort of emote are we looking into? This is the first time I've used white nervous site. And what any of the emote? Oh, okay. So basically, write what sort of an emotion you would like expressed via an emote, and I will create that emote. Alright. For now, let's continue.
Willing to go negotiate with, for example, China's peace plan, which was not perfect, I admit, but it was better than Russia's initial terms. However, you don't have to agree with all the preconditions. For example, they did have negotiations in Turkey before, which was in large part dishonest negotiations from the Russians, as it was very early in the war. And on the other side, the West were pushing Ukraine not to
It's not about just being early in the war. Okay. Russia has a very specific relationship with Ukraine, and to not understand that is basically to come unprepared to talk, is to be unequipped to talk about this topic, to not understand the very complicated relationship between Russia and Ukraine. Angry. Okay. Like, it is a bit annoying. I'm not going to lie. It is a bit annoying to see people so willy-nilly talk about those things without having a clue.
negotiate. So obviously those negotiations were going nowhere. But the position now is a lot more stable, as the front is just inching meter by meter in Russia's favor, while Ukraine is massing practically on NATO army in equipment and training.
Well, it seems like there's just no reason to negotiate then. Like, from what it seems, and you agree, is like, on every level, Russia's preconditions are unacceptable. They're insane. And also Putin lies constantly. So, like, why negotiate? Why even legitimize the idea of a peace deal with Putin under these conditions? Like, the only thing you're really doing by talking with him, by negotiating with him, when this is the way he's acting, is you're giving him the ability to walk away from the table and go, see, Ukraine isn't willing to come to a deal, because the deal that
True.
Putin was willing to accept was like,
Ridiculous deal.
yeah, become my bitch state forever. You know,
True.
there's no point. Like they're obviously being done in bad
Agreed.
faith.
Hard
It's
agree.
better to just keep the fight going. It
True.
seems like there are only two ways through this, right? Like it's conquest of Ukraine or Russia loses entirely, because
True.
there is no actual peace state between these two countries. The way Putin is negotiating right now makes it clear that he will not accept anything other than Ukraine being his bitch, whether it's directly through like the annexation of land or indirectly through forcing them into a bunch of terrible.
He basically wants Ukraine to become the second Belarus. We already see what happens when Russia has a firm grip over the country. Literally, the whole country, all of the people of Belarus tried to overthrow Lukashenko but couldn't, because Belarus is a puppet state of Russia, and Putin wants Ukraine to basically be in the same position as Belarus is right now. That is the goal of Putin. And let's not even kid ourselves that that's somehow not the case.
Peace treaty conditions that that make them completely subject to Russia's whims. So if that's the case, they have to fight.
So, okay, first of all, a few questions. How far are you willing to take this war on a United States perspective, right? So obviously, what Ukrainians want is the most important, but also impossible to like really assess, as democracy dies in war, and it happens in every single country that goes to war.
I think we
But
just supply them infinite money. I don't care. We have an infinite military budget. Like everything we've contributed to them so far has been 5% of our military budget. It's
oh yeah, I mean, you have cash. That's not what I'm asking. But like, do you send F-16s if Russia doesn't quit,
Yep.
even though Ukraine pushes back to the border? Do you go into Russia? Like, how far do you think you're willing to go with this war? If Russia uses a tactical nuke, do you respond? Like, how far are you willing to go? Right?
well, if
So
Russia used
we-
You kick. The goal is for Ukraine to kick Russia out of its territory. That's it. There is no need to go into Russia. That's it.
without
tactical nuke,
considering negotiations.
well,
course.
if Russia used a nuke, we would have to kill Putin. I think at that point, like the only sane solution would be like
True.
NATO like opsecing the fuck out of the Kremlin and just like reducing its internals into like a bloody homogenate. That any solution
True.
other than that one is an objectively incorrect one.
True.
If we establish a precedent where Putin can invade a neighboring country for literally no reason, then nuke them when he doesn't get his way, then he needs to die, and that's the only answer.
True.
Up until that point,
Very
though,
good
like if we're
answer
gonna
from
talk about
Josh.
stuff before it gets that far,
Very good.
you know, I'm fully okay with committing an enormous amount of military resources to the defeat of fascism. It's not like we're using our military budget for anything good anyway, right? Like it's it's
No,
not.
I'm not asking about the money cost. I'm talking about like
F-16s,
the
yeah, sure.
human cost of the war. How much of human, like basically blood and I guess Ukrainian cities, how much do you think is wise to sacrifice if you were Ukrainian, for example, right? How much would you be willing, like
Ukrainian people are willing to fight for however long it takes. I'm so tired of this silly argument of you will fight to the last Ukrainian. Oh, how many of them are you willing to sacrifice? No. Ukrainian people are willing to fight for their country. Like, come on. Give me a break. And keep in mind, Ukrainian families are open, like, come to Poland and wait out the war in safety here. Okay?
Ukraine is left an independent or semi-independent Ash. Like, how far do you think is wise to go?
Well, that's up to them. But if I
True.
had to like project myself into that decision for them and make an estimation, it seems to me like it's a war for extermination either way. Like how hard should a
True.
country fight to resist total extermination? The answer historically is that countries almost always fight to the last breath to defend themselves, you know? Like if a
True.
land is being invaded by a genocidal neighbor, usually, you know, the population is willing to fight up to
Yep.
the last point. And we can see that through like polling data, like support for Zelensky and support for his behavior with regards to defending against Russia,
Of course.
where something like 90% of Ukraine's population supports what he's doing, which means that in spite of all the war and bloodshed, like, you know, the people of Ukraine want to keep fighting. And I think that's
Yeah.
because they agree with what I'm saying, which is that like Russia will kill all of them.
Of course.
Russia's conditions for a cessation of conflict right now are that Ukraine make themselves open to a follow-up invasion. Putin
Yep.
just wants the blood and soil thing, you know? Like there's no way around that. You can only go through it.
Agreed.
So I think,
Agreed.
like, so you believe, fascism? Oh, fucking hell. Do you actually believe that? I'm sorry if I curse. Is that okay, by the way?
You can
I've
curse.
done it a few times. I'm sorry.
You can curse and your
Okay.
English is excellent. You have nothing to apologize about.
Thanks. No. So first of all, do you think actually Russia's okay? When you talk about Russia doing a genocide, do you think like Holocaust, like extermination genocide,
Oh no, are we talking about this topic again?
the Russification, which sounds not so serious, but like the extermination of a culture, the extermination of a people?
I think it would be a broad extermination of their culture, along with
True.
camps built for dissidents, which would probably be like most of the population. And I think that it
Yeah,
would be
we-
kind of like a Uyghur Muslim thing, where it would be like
True.
a state of like broader police occupation, where people who like they would probably do widespread bans of certain cultural or
Isn't Norway supposed to be pretty close to us? What's going on? How is this person so ignorant?
like historical or language things. People who like, for example,
Come on.
supported Zelensky or like associates with the regime or anything like that. And then like if they were caught doing that, they'd be sent to camps and they would either be like killed or quote unquote re-educated. I don't think it would literally be like the death of the entire population, but I think it would like easily clear like anyone's definition of a genocide,
Yep.
both on a cultural and a population level.
True. I agree.
I mean, yeah, possibly. I mean, I think it's. Will never say it's impossible because they do a lot of crazy shit from time to time. But I think we're probably more like a Turkish treatment of the Kurds, which is awful. But I mean, for example, Russia fought a separatist war with Chechnya in the 1990s, but they didn't turn to then just eliminate the culture, even though it was a separatist war.
Russia has a very specific history with Ukraine. All right? You cannot just compare. You cannot just compare it to Georgia or Chechnya. It's different. It's different for a very important reason. Like it or not, for Russia, Ukraine is a very big problem on an existential level. All right? Because Russia, the whole shtick of Russia, ever since Russia stopped being the Great Duchy of Moscow and started being Russia, is that Russia is the inheritor of Kiev Rus. Okay? And Ukraine also happens to be the inheritor of Kiev Rus. to a bigger extent than Russia itself, which in Russia's sort of perception means that Ukraine is more Russian than Russia itself, which in turn means that Russia absolutely cannot allow it to be. Okay, does that make sense? Does that make sense what I'm telling you right now? Like there's a very important reason why for so many years Russia has been so eager to erase Ukrainian culture. You know? And it's a very long historical reason.
Because Chechens have a distinct culture.
Well, I do
But-
think what's happened to the Kurds is also genocide. I support
Okay,
Kurdish
yeah.
independence movements, and yeah, as
Oh, absolutely, me too.
some people in chat have been pointing out, that like there's already been an effort to like steal Ukrainian children and reassign them to Russian parents. I in a lot
It's
of
not an effort, it's happening. Like it's not a thing, it's not a thing that Russia is trying to do. It's a thing that Russia is already doing. All right?
ways, it kind of reminds me of
Yeah.
like the Native American thing.
Yep.
Where
That's
ton
a
of the
good
Native
comparison.
Americans who died, it actually wasn't our fault. It was disease. We didn't control that. But then we come like after their population has been decimated, right? Like we show up, and then it's like this mixture of dishonest land treaties, like outright mass killings, and like this weird cultural co-opting thing where they send the children to boarding schools and it's illegal to like smoke a peace pipe within a town or whatever, and like all that crap together. And the broad effect of that right now is that like Native American people are like kind of gone. Like they're not really gone in the US, but it's
Right.
not their land
Yeah,
anymore.
I mean,
And
it's
I
not a
think
culture of force anymore.
yeah, and I think that's kind of what would happen with Ukraine.
Yeah.
Maybe not as severely as that, but I mean, given what's on the table, you know, I can't blame Ukrainians for wanting to fight.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, like I don't disagree with Ukraine's willingness to fight. What my issue is, that
I
in a
just
sense,
don't
yeah,
like it when
obviously
people that
Russia-
are totally unequipped to talk about Ukraine start having very strong opinions on it.
Russia's in the wrong.
It's
But-
annoying.
You have to negotiate an end to the war, which will satisfy Ukraine. And I don't say they don't fight while they negotiate, as that's exactly what they did last time. But I think, especially like, either they negotiate before the offensive while a warning is there, or they sort of gamble it. But I think if they don't negotiate, Ukraine will also become less and less independent after the war, the longer the war goes on, as their economic situation will be more and more destitute. I mean, large part of Eastern Europe today is still in a state of basically third world status, right? You have slums
Let's hear that again.
in a state of basically third world status, right? You have slums in Romania that are far worse than many in Africa, right? And the longer the war stays on, the more dependent they will be on the West
I'm
and
not sure where this person is taking this information from, but
be essentially colonized by the West,
Well-
especially by countries like Germany for cheap labor and such.
Ukraine has significant natural resources it can take advantage
no. I'm not sure where this person is taking that information from, but no.
of. But also, like, none of what you're saying doesn't remain the case if they just surrender to Russia and become their effective vassal, you know?
True.
Like, all,
That's not what I'm arguing for.
well, the conditions that were, like, when we talk about conditions to negotiate for, that is what we're talking about, because that's the only thing that Russia's allowing for.
True.
I mean, you say that, but I don't necessarily think that's the case, as they have
Yeah, that's because you don't have a clue about how Russia operates. Like This is a bit frustrating for me.
been positive to a Chinese peace plan,
Didn't they
and
reject
China
that?
would not have proposed a peace plan without talking to Russia first, obviously.
Didn't they reject that peace plan though?
Russia?
Did
I
that?
have not seen that update, but if that has come, then I might be wrong on that. I'm
You
open
are.
to that fact.
I mean, a lot of like China's peace plan, I'm pretty sure was pretty bad for Ukraine anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not perfect. That's why I negotiated to better your terms
But-
while we fight on the battlefield to try to better your terms there as well.
The only acceptable term is that Russia leaves, though, because all of their like Russia has made their intentions clear. It's like death now or death later. Everything that Russia
Thank you very much. Good for Gabby. I hope you feel better soon.
has done and signaled, all of the like, you can go on Russian state media and see them talk about what's going on, and like they're
Like the Russian state media, which is a good thing that Vosh brought it up, but like Russian state media just talks about how Russia is waging a war against the whole Western world, which is a Nazi Western world. Like Russia is not talking about the Nazifying Ukraine anymore. Now Russia is talking about fighting the Nazi West. That's first of all. Second of all, Russia keeps trying to put a wedge between Poland and Ukraine by saying that Poland is about to invade any day now. Any day now, Poland will just invade in order to get Kiev and Lviv back. Any day now. Like,
Oh,
this
Barry!
is really sad. Thank you so much, Jess, for presenting, for gifting. Good for Gabby, a tier 1 subscription. Like, it's pathetic. Like,
they're openly
Russian propaganda is openly talking about, like, how all of Europe is Nazi and, like, how Poland just wants to annex Ukraine. I would like to remind you that in 2014, Putin basically told the then Prime Minister of Poland, he basically proposed that Poland and Russia should just divide Ukraine between themselves. And when the Polish politician refused, Putin just said that he was joking or something. Very funny joke, okay? Propositioning a country to just divide a place between themselves, right? Very funny joke. All right? I would just remind you that this happened in 2014. Putin directly told Poland that Russia and Poland could just divide Ukraine between those two countries.
genocidal
So don't even.
there. In on
Certain
Russian
anchors,
state,
yeah.
like a ton of Russian state actors nonstop are like, yeah, haha, we'll you know, they say Buka was bad, we'll do Buka 10 times over. We'll kill them all. Yeah, blah, blah. Like they're insanely
Don't
bloodthirsty over
even.
there. And those guys aren't like random YouTubers. Those are paid agents of the state.
True.
The reason they're saying that stuff up there is because the state, the Kremlin, wants the population of Russia to be dismissive of a genocide against Ukrainian people. Like they
Yeah.
want the average Russian citizen to think like, oh, genocide of Ukrainians? Well, they're not a real people anyway.
True.
That's like the explicit goal on the table here. So given all of this, I just don't think there's a point in engaging with any kind of negotiation. If Russia wants to end the war, they can leave. They always have that power.
True.
Outside of that, what are we even doing?
So, first of all, yeah, the rhetoric on Russian state TV is absolutely insane. Seen some of it, or at least translated. Yeah, it's genocide. I don't disagree with that. But at the same time, for example, when I know Iraq has been taken over.
It's not just genocidal rhetoric. Look at what they're doing in Ukraine already. It's not just a game of a rhetoric. Like saying that is also pretty ridiculous.
Way too many times during the conversation about Ukraine. But for example, when the United States invaded Iraq, George Bush was referring to it as a crusade constantly, right? But even though he referred to it as a crusade, it didn't mean that they actually like slapped the cross on the soldiers and started like forcibly converting the population.
I mean,
Like, yeah,
Christian
rhetoric is insane,
supremacy.
and their actions are also horrible. But I do not think that's the state policy goal is to genocide Ukraine.
Well,
I think the state policy goal is to expand Russian influence
You
and
have no clue how Russia operates. You just have no clue what you're talking about. That's it. I'm not sure why this person even called in to talk about this. If they have no clue what they're talking about.
to stop further NATO sort of like encroachment into what they
Why?
consider their sphere of influence.
but their sphere of influence is one that they constantly invade and bully. NATO like does its shit consensually. Leaving aside the Iraq comparison and like looking at what we're seeing right here, it is very like Russia will not accept anything other than a Ukraine they control. They have
True.
never
That is
at
true,
any point even
100%.
remotely entertained the idea of Ukraine being a part of the West. Yanukovych was a puppet of Putin, and the moment Yanukovych got ousted for trying to become a dictator,
Yeah, because as I've said a few times before, Russia just wants a second Belarus. In fact, what Russia would love is that if all of the countries that made up the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth would become Russia puppets, so Belarus, Ukraine, Poland, and Lithuania. That would be the optimal scenario for Russia. I don't know if the color is a tanky. Hello, Shai Hulud. Hello.
the Putin fucking started the war in the Donbass. Like the beginning of this, the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine was a direct consequence of the puppet leader that he wanted to control Ukraine on his behalf being ousted. Given
Yeah.
all of this, I just don't think there's any reason to believe that that they will accept any outcome for Ukraine other than total conquest. And total conquest in this case would necessitate a cultural genocide because that's what they've been talking about this whole time. Ukraine's not a real country. Ukraine is really a part of Russia. You know, they
Exactly.
talk about how the nationhood of Ukraine is just like a Nazi Banderite thing, and that it's illegitimate. You know, that
Of course, this is total nonsense. This is total nonsense.
they're doing Nazi fighting by taking it over. I just don't think there's any world in which concessions to Russia bring about anything other than a slow death for Ukraine.
True. I agree. 100%.
Yeah, I guess we kind of do come to a sense of impassable disagreement on Russia's willingness to negotiate
Yeah, because if you have no clue.
that, because I think that's sort of the key question. Like, because neither of us want Ukraine to surrender, obviously, but for my part, I do believe that you have to negotiate at some point, because I think Russia will continue to.
Yeah, we can negotiate. We can negotiate Russia's surrender. That is the sort of negotiation that Ukraine should be open to entertain. All right?
Use their military-industrial complex to keep the war going and use their superior population as to military manpower, especially as enormous amount of Ukraine has left the war at this point. So for me, like a forever war in Ukraine goes into Russia's favor. I do think that it's more intelligent to negotiate a way out of this rather than to destroy both countries, especially Ukraine, which in that case it loses either way. Either it loses by
This is so easy to say, you know? This
losing
is
to
so
Russia,
easy to say.
which would
Just
be
negotiate, forehead. Just negotiate.
probably the worst option of them all, or it loses by having the entire industry and production capabilities destroyed, and then becoming a colony of the West as sort of a cheap labor force and cheap natural resources.
I mean,
Because you
even the
mentioned that
worst
Ukraine
case.
has resources, but so does the Congo, right? And so does many other Latin American countries. But it doesn't mean that they get rich or get by.
Okay,
It means that they are.
I don't think there's any reason to believe the West's relationship with Ukraine would be anywhere near that exploitative. We've
True.
committed a pretty significant
That's true. There are already big plans of rebuilding Ukraine. So let's stop with this BS.
amount of resources broadly, to help Ukraine. We're not the ones colonizing them. Russia is.
True.
It just seems kind of like disingenuous in a situation where Russia is choosing to invade Ukraine, that we're having a conversation about whether we colonize them,
Yeah.
like in the future after helping them defeat, like we can see where the actual threat is right now for the
I
Ukrainian
mean, yeah,
people.
Russia is like. There's no pretending that Russia isn't the bad guy in this. They obviously are. But the thing,
But
like for example,
always the
yeah,
but.
we have spent huge amounts to help
Always the
Ukraine,
but.
but we spent huge amounts to help South Vietnam, for example, and yeah, we lost there, but it didn't mean that we cared about.
That is a very different situation, by the way. The Vietnamese War is such a different scenario that it's not even funny. And the US was on the wrong side of that conflict because the US supported France, and France invaded Vietnam because France wanted to make Vietnam its colony again. So don't even try to compare this to the Vietnam War because those examples are totally incompatible.
The country in any meaningful capacities, and the West has sent.
Those are not compatible examples at all. You cannot just throw all of the conflicts that you know that the US took part in at the wall and see what sticks. We have to know what you're talking about.
Or mainly the US as the primary Western hegemon, has spent enormous
Oh my
resources
god,
in
Western hegemon. Like we have all the hits, we have all the slogans. All the slogans are being taken out of the shed.
countries like Iraq, but it doesn't mean that they create a relationship beneficial to Iraqis.
But we're trying to get Ukraine to join the EU. I mean, we're like,
True. Ukraine is already on the way to join the EU, mind you. Like, Ukraine is already in the middle of the war doing the necessary reforms in order to be accepted into the EU.
this isn't the Congo.
Okay? The process is already underway. Easy to talk of negotiations when it's not your home that's being destroyed. Exactly. Exactly.
Pretty clearly trying to bring Ukraine into the fold as like a European country, as
Yep.
part of the West. Like it just seems odd to me that when it comes to the intentions of Russia, you're relatively charitable in that your immediate like assumption isn't that all of this meandering about negotiation is just a way for them to pave the way for like future control of the country. But then when it comes to the West and all of the assistance and military equipment and money we've given them, it's like, well, maybe we're just going to turn them into the Congo. Don't you think like if there's
Like,
anyone to be more suspicious of, it's clearly Russia, and the Ukrainian people agree because the Ukrainian people want to be a part of the EU and want to be a part of NATO.
Not
and they
just want, the process has already started. there was this nice ceremony when mm, the representatives from the EU have brought documents for President Zelensky to sign that officially the Ukraine has entered the road to becoming part of the EU, right? And they're already working on certain things that they are necessary for Ukraine to meet in order to be able to join the EU. Ukraine is already in the middle of the war working on those things.
Want to fight against
It's
Russia.
important to
And
know.
Russia is the one choosing to do all of this. It seems like we're assigning no
Remember.
agency to Russia. They're just a force of nature that gets to be evil for fun. But somehow, even though their evil is something we take for granted, we're making predictions based on the West suddenly being way more evil than it has been up to this point, and Russia being less evil than it has been up to this point in the future.
Right.
I don't think Russia will become any less evil. Probably more until and Putin dies. But
I'm
with
gonna put it out there. Putin is not the main problem of Russia. It's a far more systemic problem than people are willing to admit, okay? Like, it's not that Russia has been a thriving democracy before Putin, okay? Like, no. No, 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 no. It's not like this one evil guy will die and everything will just solve itself. No,
take the West, for
that's not how it works.
example, you can look at the way they treated large parts of Eastern Europe up until now. For example, Hungary has now turned into a sort of fascist pseudo one or pretend to be democracy. Romania still has massive slums and huge amount of poor people, and those are EU countries. I know Hungary is, I think Romania is. Like, yeah, economic
I'm surprised this person didn't even mention. Oh, Right. We back. Are we back? Hello? Something happened to the stream. Let me check something. Like we had a technical problem and suddenly I couldn't. Is everybody still here? All right. Sorry for that little bit of a pause. Something just, I don't know. We had a bit of a technical hiccup. Now we're back.
Realities remain, even though the West were acting in the best of like intentions.
I'm surprised this person didn't mention Poland. I guess Somniostatic is going to have to cut out that whole pause.
Without like immense resources to rebuild Ukraine.
Yeah, and immense resources will be given, of course.
Like
all plans are already in motion.
Matching those we used to
And
rebuild
how's
Germany.
Belarus doing?
Exactly.
Belarus is
That is a really great question. If this person is gonna praise how Belarus is doing, I'm just gonna laugh at this person's invisible face.
we used to
And
rebuild
how's
Germany.
Belarus doing?
Belarus is doing horribly. I'm not saying that
Okay.
Ukraine would do better
That's good. That's good.
under Russian occupation. It would do worse. That's not my argument. My argument is that you want them to be
That is good that you're not making that argument.
a colony of neither.
But
So
there-
to
no,
do
but-
that, you would
But again, like
need to.
that's
That's ridiculous. The word that Vosh is looking for is ridiculous.
really disingenuous when Russia is literally invading them and we're their ally and we keep offering them things and all of them want to be with us. We're not in a Ukraine is not a single independent country that is being fought over by two equally domineering and possessive like
True.
colonial entities. We are their allies and Russia is their enemy.
True. Vosh is correct.
There's the ambiguity just doesn't exist there.
Yep.
So we are their ally, but it's not like countries aren't people. We are their allies, but we're not their friends. First of all, but second,
So, I mean, when that depends on the country, right? Like literally, between Poland and Ukraine, it goes into the language of brotherhood and friendship. So,
second of all, I wouldn't argue that Russia is working in good faith. I'm not trying to defend Russia in any way. I'm not saying that you should make concessions that leaves Ukraine open for invasion number 2, right?
And what concessions
But-
would you agree to?
For example, when you are fighting your situation in America, right, with the Republicans just going crazy mode, what you always, from what I watched from your streams, is you keep repeating that you need to fight for time, right? That you can't go to the most like hardcore socialists at this time because you need to first and foremost prevent the coming onslaught of fascism, and then you can focus on more like idealized goals. The same kind of logic I would bring to this conflict.
this is a very different situation. This person keeps doing comparisons that are extremely, completely incompatible.
Where what you have to do first is to get an end to the destruction of Ukraine,
while also keeping Russia from colonizing or occupying or enslaving practically the country. And I think you can reach those two goals. Maybe not in a first round of negotiations. It might not just like
These are
happen.
incompatible examples.
But I think by starting a negotiation process while fighting, you are way more likely to come to a
But Pu-
conclusion that ends better for Ukraine
but
in
Putin only negotiates in
victory.
bad faith. I don't think we have any evidence ever of Putin engaging in like military aggression where he negotiates in a fashion that leads to the mutual benefit of the two parties.
Right.
Like he's
that
pretty universally like an evil guy when it comes to this. What concessions would you even agree to then? All
Yeah.
the stuff you said you wouldn't want is stuff that Russia said is like a deal breaker if they don't have.
True.
I mean, yeah, but obviously they try to enter a negotiation as strong as possible. Every country does. Like the FARC didn't say that. Oh yeah, of course we'll lay down.
No,
our
no, no.
weapons
This
when
is
they
just naive
eventually did
thinking.
negotiate.
And I'm being charitable here.
Yeah, you have to like sort of to one extent ignore the bullshit, but
is
to another
ridiculous.
extent, like, yeah, you said that, yeah, but we're willing to negotiate, but this, and this we don't negotiate with, and you try to open dialogue.
Yeah, those negotiations happened. And they didn't go anywhere.
While not agreeing to the worst concessions.
All right, well,
right?
Ukraine has done
Um,
that because they've said that they're open at any time to accept Russia's unconditional retreat.
Yeah, right, but
No, that's
That's
my
like-
that's my unironic
that's
answer.
rhetoric, right? That's not serious.
No. That's a charitable offer because in a world
It is very serious. What do you mean? Like, this person has no clue. It's really annoying when people like that try to.
without nukes,
Discuss
Ukraine would be
topics.
seriously pushing for Russian territory after this.
Yep.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
A world without nuke would probably have the Cold War ended a lot differently as well.
the
That's
fact
not
that Russia
reality we live in.
has like leaving on the table is a blessing to them. So like what other set of negotiations would be acceptable? He's the one who invaded, he's the one who has to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm trying to say is, yeah, I'm obviously in an ethical world, Russia would just have to leave. But where you fight until Russia leaves probably will reduce Ukraine to a third world country at best.
But-
so, for example,
Well, that is a price that Ukraine is willing to pay. Plus, it will be rebuilt. Plans are already in place to do that.
like I guess it's two things. First,
This
what
is ridiculous.
I tried to mention earlier is, for example, Peter Sayan. I guess he's a geopolitical strategist who worked for Stratfor. Expect Ukraine to become a food importer for the first time in the country's history in not that long of a time if the war continues, right? And Russia would probably disintegrate beyond that. As well as that when it comes to like Putin's good faith or trustworthiness, there is none. I don't say you trust Putin to honor the negotiations other than to stop the war,
Well, then, if you don't trust for Putin to honor the negotiations, then what's the point of negotiating?
right? But then would be the West's job to strategize behind the scenes to get a way to protect Ukraine, right? For example, Taiwan is not in NATO, and it wouldn't need an official military alliance with the US for the US to intervene on their behalf, as the US has intervened many a times with countries that haven't had official military relationships, or relationship is the wrong word, treaties with. But you still can intervene, you still can make sure Russia knows that if they try bullshit again, the cost will be even higher the next time.
This has the opposite effect that you think it does.
True.
Russia or Ukraine conceding early and going like, "Oh, don't hurt me anymore, big boy Russia." Okay, sure. In the meantime, you can have these concessions while trying to build up time. Well, these concessions will invariably require Ukraine to not be a part of NATO or any military alliance or the
True.
EU, which means they won't be able to regrow in the fashion you suggest.
True.
Russia will consider it an escalation if we provide them assistance, military or economic, because that will be a prerequisite of Russia's treaty making with them. And then additionally, like, you think that after we essentially tell Russia, like, okay, you get away with this one, oopsie whoopsie, that they're going to be more cautious about us directly intervene in the future? We've told them the opposite. We did appeasement.
Yeah.
I do not buy the idea that, like, there's any purpose to negotiating, and I don't buy the idea that Russia would accept any set of negotiations that would not just be laying the groundwork for future military action against you.
Agreed. They would just break the treaty after rebuilding their forces. Of course.
Right. Everything they've said
Yep.
seems to suggest this, and I really think we're just playing ourselves for cucks here.
True.
The best thing we can do is keep fighting, and the fight's going well.
Yep.
Ukraine is pushing.
Although Ukraine should be receiving more aid. In my personal opinion, Ukraine needs more aid. Even more. More jets, more tanks, more stuff. Ukraine needs more.
Russia further and further back. Russia has had, like, basically no territorial gains, but every couple of months they have, like,
You don't have to like each other for it to have mutual benefit. True. Exactly.
massive territorial loss. The news out of there is consistently positive. Russia's capable of maintaining, like, its stores of ammunition for a while, but not everything else. It's running out of tanks, and eventually it's going to run out of people. It may have a lot of people, but it doesn't have a lot of morale. I mean, the reservists
Right.
that they lied to and brought on board, like, at the beginning of the war were unhappy enough to be there in the first place.
Like, Ukraine even started this whole program that allows Russian soldiers to safely surrender and,
Now they're, like,
deserted their post.
doing conscript drafts for the Weimar group. They have a bunch of, like, prisoners with no military training dying on the front lines. It's literally like the Russian military strategy right now is just throwing a bunch of untrained dudes at
One of the leaders of the Weimar, of the whole platoon in Russia defected.
the front
as well.
lines and relying on massive reserves of Cold War artillery. Wagner Group, not Weimar Group.
Yeah, Wagner.
Yeah, thank you.
I-
Sorry. Relying on massive
The
reserves
Wagner
of
boss
artillery and ammunition
defected, which was a pretty loud thing for a while.
in order to, like, pound the front lines from a distance, so their god awfully trained soldiers don't actually see any direct combat. Like, it's not going well for Russia, and Russia can't keep this up forever. China isn't happy with how Russia's doing right now.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious geopolitically that China considers Russia a liability, which they are. I don't think we should rely on Russia getting, like, nonstop access to Chinese military equipment in order to continue these fronts, you know? There's just a lot going wrong for Russia.
Thankfully.
So while I would definitely agree that Russia isn't exactly performing like most people expected, to say it the least, the situation lately has been Russia taking, while small amounts of territory in, like, landmass, having huge battles to disintegrate Ukrainian military. Obviously, I've been to the military, but I'm not a military expert. But what I would
Oh boy.
argue
You're
is
not,
that, yeah, Russia is capable,
you're
or
not an expert. No.
has stalled, and which is awesome. Although I would be careful to believe that Ukraine can fight them back, at least, I guess, until the new offensive, which will be Ukraine bringing everything, like, shiny that they recently gotten. But I guess to some extent we kind of reach at a stalemate on the, like, idea that first and foremost the war can be won, and second, I should have wrote it down. I think you argue that never mind, I think I forgot. But I
see.
think, like, yeah, if I were to adopt your view of the conflict and how the conflict is going, as well as the way that it can end, I would probably adopt your view But I think I'm way more skeptical to the belief that a military victory where you push back to the 1991 borders is possible. I mean, from my analysis, almost impossible.
Your
Or at least
analysis is not
extremely
really
unlikely.
good.
I think what is more
I
likely is that,
think.
yeah, Ukraine is gonna have a major offensive. It's impossible to know how that's
You're
gonna
really flattering yourself by calling this analysis.
go. Because remember, when Ukraine had not the Kiev one, but the second like major counteroffensive, which took a
Yeah.
large swath of territory, that was before Russian conscription, where their invasion force was like around 1/3 the manpower that they have now. Taking territory now won't be like speeding through like thinly defended Russian lines. It will be facing an artillery wall and a wall of dug-in soldiers, which is infinitely harder and infinitely more costly in manpower, especially in areas that are not forested. So I would be skeptical to the after the draft how capable Ukraine are of taking territory. But I will agree that if Ukraine managed to like separate for example, separate the land bridge to Crimea, I would probably adopt your worldview or your view of how the conflict should end. But in lieu of that, or before that has happened, or if it fails, I would definitely stand for trying to end this by negotiation and obviously not
Which
surrendering
means
and obviously not
Ukraine giving something up.
giving Russia like outsized influence in Ukraine, but probably something like, for example, Kurdistan in Iraq, where the Kurds are practically independent with their own like local governance, but still a
There
part
you
of
go.
Iraq. And obviously, all Russian soldiers will have to go in a treaty, but with some concessions.
What
with
if I
that.
just think that Putin is the threat to global security, and I just want Ukraine to resist for as long as possible, so that his failure can lead his oligarch buddies to toss him out of a window?
So the problem there is there's no one really to replace Putin, at least not today.
That's not
Let the
There
country
isn't
collapse
really.
then.
That would probably be really bad for everyone. Like, it's impossible to predict such a scenario with
That's
accuracy.
not true.
But the fight over Russian gas, as right now,
But
Germany
saying that someone is irreplaceable is scope. It's just
is
scope.
deindustrializing because of their
Come on.
lack of energy.
No one is
Will probably
irreplaceable.
scramble along with China on the other side, who's also dependent on Russian gas, to like war over different fracturing ethnic and national states.
Well, then, damn, sounds like a shit country. Like,
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
is.
the problem is,
It
like,
100% is.
like it seems like the problem is right now, like, this is an impossible win with Putin continuing to be in office.
True.
Because with Putin,
It is.
yeah, it's with Putin, it's like he wants to invade all the countries around him. He wants blood and soil. He wants to bring the empire back. And also he threatens to nuke the world constantly. And also helping your allies that he just arbitrarily decides are his property is a threat against him. Like, everything that he does is just, like, impossible to deal with.
True.
Purely because his country has nukes. It seems like the only
Yeah.
actual way forward is like, okay, fine, you want to abduct all these countries. Okay, well, here's Ukraine. Good luck with it, you know. And then if he suffers and if it doesn't work out for him, that's what needs to happen.
True.
I guess an analogy I would use in this situation is kind of Russia's pretty much taken everything around them hostage in a sense. But if you go to a hostage negotiation, you don't just breach the front door, because the second you do that, all the hostages would start getting executed, right? You either have to take out the leader.
What is
which
with those
all
crappy
in the ideal world, the
comparisons? What is with those horrible comparisons?
Russian people would
What?
do. Either that, or you have to negotiate the release of the hostages.
Yeah, we
If
don't
you just
negotiate
barge
with
the door,
Russia.
every hostage that in that room will get shot in the head. And right now, if you just like try to outright
Ridiculous.
fight Russia with no like breaks, you would probably end up in a much worse situation than
There are many oligarchs in Russia. Putin can easily be replaced if something happens to him. True. Like, it's ridiculous to say that Putin is somehow special and irreplaceable. Like, come on.
if you either try to negotiate the release of the hostages, or you hope for
This is
you hope that you
ridiculous.
find a way to have the Russian leader removed and replaced with someone who is a bit more practically minded.
I mean, but the situation, right? This is the situation. It's him breaking his back against Ukraine. That's this is the good ending.
Yep.
What other situation
don't
is going
think-
to arise that could potentially lead to enough of a decrease? God damn it! Enough of a decrease in popularity and prominence for Putin that we would be able to get this opportunity.
Yeah, well, what's even supposed to be the equivalent of executing the hostages, invading even more? Exactly. Like, Russia's already murdering people left and right. Russia's placing mines inside of dead bodies. Like, there was this infamous circulated video of a prisoner of war being decapitated. Like, that's a really good question. What would be the equivalent of executing the hostages?
Yeah, but I don't think that you can do that.
He's just saying given to imperialism. I mean, that seems to be the case from my perspective.
Like, you can do that if you, I mean, yes, are willing to send like more and better Ukrainian weapons and
Sure.
probably sacrifice the whole of Ukraine.
Well, I'm
But-
not sacrificing them. They support Zelensky.
They,
True.
yeah, but they don't have like. I don't want to compare.
What? What is he gonna say that Ukrainians don't know what they're saying?
Ukraine to like a dictatorship because it's a country of war, and as I said,
Ukraine is not a dictatorship. People from Poland at the beginning of the invasion, men living in Poland left to Ukraine to fight. Give me a break with this BS.
earlier, no
They're a liberal
democracy
democracy.
survives in war, and no democracy should, because democracy
Give
and
me a
war are sort of
break.
oxymorons. But
Give
you
me a
don't
break.
really know. Like, yeah, he got 96% approval rating, but so does Assad, and no, Ukraine isn't as bad as Assad.
No, that's
But
bullshit. No. The polls for
That
Assad's
is bullshit,
popularity are
yeah.
literally like the Syrian government like points a gun at you and it's like, "Hey, how do you feel about Assad?" Oh, you like him? Great, thanks. Like, no, that's not true. Ukraine is a liberal democracy. It's not
Yeah.
a dictatorship. The measures that
It-
Zelensky has
What
taken
is this BS? Of course, Ukraine is not as bad. Like, get out of here.
to curb dissidents within the country are well within lines for a liberal democracy that's being invaded. It's less significant than what a lot of Western European democracies did when being invaded by Germany in World War II.
Yeah.
I would not be more liberal than Zelensky if my country were invaded. So again, it's not like a judgment of the country of Ukraine, but at the same time, calling it a liberal democracy is somewhat disingenuous. As
No,
is.
it's not. It's
first of all,
not.
most corrupt country in Europe.
No, wait,
it-
hold on. They have had massive reductions in political corruption over the
True.
past a decade and a half. A huge portion
And they have, because I know that Ukraine still tackles with corruption, and it is actually one of the conditions for Ukraine joining the European Union. And Ukraine is tackling this problem very seriously because Ukraine is officially now on the road of joining the European Union. This problem is being addressed.
of their political corruption came from the
Okay.
fact that they were effectively a Russian puppet state up until Euromaidan
Yep.
and Yanukovych was ousted. Additionally, there is
This problem is being
no
tackled
contest on
seriously.
Zelensky's popularity. The political
True.
corruption has to do with like a number of ways in which their country isn't perfectly operated, but it
True.
has nothing to do with the legitimacy of Zelensky's popularity.
And I will add that this problem is being addressed. It is being addressed as we speak. I have no clue why all this goes back to Assad.
Popularity. The idea that he's even remotely comparable to Assad is just disingenuous.
True.
I tried to
Ridiculous.
incorporate that in what I said, that they're not the same. I would never argue that. Assad is first of all, a lot more brutal, and
It's not about them not being the same. They're not in the same universe.
second of all, never had a pretend democracy even.
No,
But
no. Ukraine is a
but
real democracy.
I will say that they are aspiring to be one, but at the same time that I wouldn't call Hungary a real democracy. I think it's pretty rough to call
No,
Ukraine is nothing like Hungary. Okay? Ukraine is nothing like Hungary. This is what I'm telling you. This person has no clue what he's talking about. No clue at all.
Ukraine a democracy.
Orban is a dictator who's made massive strides to de-democratize his country and attack the press.
True.
Like Zelensky
Doesn't just make strides to attack the press. The free press does not exist in Hungary anymore. And if Karasukavka was here, she would tell us all about it.
he hasn't. Where are you getting these comparisons from?
True. Exactly. That's an excellent question. Excellent question. Where is he getting all those comparisons from?
First of all, even though they have done strides against corruption, it doesn't really change the fact that it is an extremely corrupt country, and
It doesn't matter. They are making strides, and they're making even more strides now because it's one of the big conditions to allow Ukraine to join the European Union.
for example, reports of small fire or vast amount of small arms.
And as Vosh has correctly pointed out, it has nothing to do with Zelensky's popularity. His popularity is legit.
Leaving Ukraine because the general selling them, or other. For example, Zelensky recently fired a ton of cabinets because they were all taking vacations while the country were at war.
What does that
Like,
have to do with the
while
legitimacy of his
Ukraine is
popularity?
Infinitely. Wait, what?
What is that? Your comparison was to Assad to imply that his popularity
Oh,
was like
yeah,
a government
because
fabrication.
First of all, if you, for example, try to in any way, like obviously, this is not a condemnation of Ukraine because this is what country does at war. Just it's what country does at war. But if you're in the opposition of Zelensky now, or try to,
Why is this person so ignorant?
for example, demonstrate or show any pro-Russian sentiment, you'll get immediately disappeared or arrested, right?
Yeah.
Disappeared not in as executed in some backyard, but you will disappear as taken to prison, right?
That's
And
fine.
that's fine, but if everyone who is openly against the Ukrainian government is then arrested or intimidated into silence, they will remain silent. So I don't think you can get a genuine pull out of a country in a brutal war for survival
no,
where the government
people-
is
people
taking
are-
every measure to
No,
ensure that.
This
No,
is cope.
the polling we have for support of Zelensky is not being done by Zelensky's government. That's the
No,
difference.
it's not. Didn't argue that.
Well, right.
But-
So no. Hold on. Anonymous polling being done for Ukrainians for their support for Zelensky is not like these people are worrying they're
Ridiculous.
going to get disappeared if their anonymous answer comes back as no. The people who are being arrested by Zelensky's government are Russian operatives and people openly
True.
supportive of the country invading them. Like, this isn't like you get arrested if you disapprove of Zelensky. It's not illegal
True.
to criticize Zelensky over there. You don't get disappeared for that. The parties that have been shut down were literally
Ridiculous.
pro-Russian parties. People have been disappeared for
and
being
I don't
directly
disagree
connected
with-
to Russia.
I don't disagree with the decision to remove pro-Russian parties. We removed the Nazi party after World War II for obvious reasons, right? But I think a comparison is, for example, when international polling, so in like objective, like Gallup or something, does polling in Russia, there are always suspicions about the accuracy of the polling, even though they are anonymous, because the population, first of all, is scared that it may be someone presenting as an independent poll while they're really not, or if someone
Yeah, but Ukraine is not Russia, okay? Ukraine is not a terrorized state by Zelensky.
are next to hear them, and
Please get out of here with that BS.
report them for their views or something like that.
Oh my
So
god.
even though yes, I believe that people responded in those polls and those polls reflected what the people responded with. But I believe that if enormous amounts of people who don't support the current regime are either leaving Ukraine or are in
Regime.
prison
So wait,
or they're
no,
Notice the wording. Regime.
intimidated
this
in
is
some way to answering
This person is being polite, but this person is betraying his hand.
to the poll.
this is bullshit again. Like you're
Yeah,
just
it is bullshit.
speculating.
Yeah.
Like there are polls.
I mean,
There are polls taken of Russian citizens, and oftentimes those polls give weird results. But I think a lot of that is just because Russian citizens are retarded and they're subject to a 24/7 propaganda machine their dictatorial government controls.
True.
When polling is done on Ukrainians, there is no question of the legitimacy of the polling. It's just polling being done of people. And you just imply
Yes.
that people who disagree with what's being done in the country are leaving. People are leaving because they don't want to die. The
True.
majority of the
That's why
refugees are women and
most leave,
children.
obviously. Yes.
This is just ridiculous. This person has no idea what he's talking about.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, millions of people didn't flee before Russia went apeshit, right? So that's not a debate. But also, if you are, for example, if you are extremely nationalist, if you are more, what you would say, patriotic or a massive fan of the current regime, you are less likely to leave. And if you
Why
already
is he calling the Ukrainian government a regime, quote unquote? Regime.
dislike the current regime, you are more likely to
No,
leave.
I'm
if you are-
sorry. I think this is nonsense. This
Yep.
began with an argument that you can't trust 94% support of Zelensky because Assad also has ridiculously high support.
True.
And now we've watered that down to maybe the legitimate polls that accurately recorded
This is ridiculous. Of course, this is nonsense. Pure nonsense.
people's authentic support for Zelensky without duress or threat aren't actually totally representative because they might be slightly more likely to stay if they're already feeling nationalistic. No. It's a liberal democracy. It has problems with corruption. I don't deny this, but the idea that like we don't have an accurate read on what the Ukrainian people want right now is wrong. We've never had a more accurate read on what
True.
people want during wartime. This is the most accurate we've ever gotten because polling's never been this good. We've never been this international, you know?
True.
Okay, but so you do genuinely believe that 94% of Ukrainians do support Zelensky?
Yep.
I think it's actually 91%. But yeah, why wouldn't
I
they?
don't know. It's 90 something, but okay. I guess I'll disagree. It's impossible to get data to sort of like
Ridiculous.
factually assess it, but I think it's a lot.
Like, watch the video that I've made of Zelensky's visit to Poland. All the Ukrainians that live in Poland came to see President Zelensky. He's extremely popular. Okay?
Things. Obviously, wartime president, especially in something like this, will get popular. I don't disagree that it is hugely
He's
popular,
extremely popular.
but I think that saying that someone, because a poll pointed that he has 90-something% favorability is sort of.
I mean, do you have
and
any
national-
evidence to the contrary? The idea that Zelensky is somehow unpopular?
I don't think he's unpopular. I think he's hugely popular. I think that what I argue is that the polls are exaggerated. Like, obviously, it was super
I don't think
unpopular
so.
before Russia went apeshit, but yeah, in a wartime, a president will get hugely popular.
I
and
don't
he's
think so.
Extremely charismatic in wartime. So I don't disagree that it is.
Is it so is it real or not? Because
I don't think the polls are exaggerated at all. All the evidence points to the conclusion that the polls are not exaggerated at all.
I agree.
I would say he's popular, but I would strongly. It would take a lot for me to believe, I guess, that he has 94, 91%.
I don't doubt it.
approval. I mean, if I'm wrong or if he's still that
But
popular,
maybe that's because I do have a clue on what I'm talking about and this person does not.
after the war, then I'll shut up, I guess. But-
You should shut up.
in lieu of like
You should
any
shut
way
up.
to scientifically measure it, then it's not that much I can say.
You should shut up.
Yeah,
Other than
it
that,
just
of
seems
course, the
odd to like
population-
because you've like suggested it's not a real democracy and like we can't actually accurately track his popularity. But
Yeah, and you've called the government a regime.
like, why? How? I mean, all the
So
evidence
I
we
would
have.
suggest that it's not a liberal democracy due to the fact that huge parts of the same oligarchy that run the country under like Russian, what you say, pseudo client statism, are still running the country, are still owning vast swaths of the country. The same oligarchs that used to bribe pro-Russian politicians still bribe pro-Ukrainian politicians. For example, Ukraine took hugely unpopular decisions with their dealings with the EU, like selling of farmlands to the EU, despite polling showing that the population was majorly against it.
But democracies
Now,
have. But
to that extent, I would probably not. I mean, maybe our definition are dissimilar, but I would not call the United States a fully
Ridiculous.
liberal democracy either. So maybe our perspectives are differently because I live in social democracy, and maybe our standards are different.
well, we're
it will
talking about
be-
liberal democracy, and we that's liberals for you. I feel like we've moved the goalposts so much. Like we
True,
were
and so
talking
many
about whether or not
times.
it was us sacrificing Ukrainian people to conflict with Putin, and I said, well, this is reflective of what they want, and it's like, well, no, it's not, because it's not a democracy, because it's like Assad.
True.
And now it's back to like, okay, well, they're like America, but like if American people want something, then it wouldn't still be really a democracy. So like it's still not enough. And it seems like the outcome of this is that there's no like the opinion of the Ukrainian people just isn't relevant to you. It just doesn't factor into
True.
your perception of how the country should
True.
behave.
True, true.
I think if Ukrainians are in agreement that they are willing to fight to the last person dying to fight, then I mean, I guess, but
Yeah.
to me, I would doubt that. But I haven't like if there are polling that says that Ukraine is
Because you
willing
don't
to
have a
fight till
clue.
the last Ukrainian basically to stay with Russian, they should
It's
be
annoying.
To the
allowed
last
to do that.
soldier,
There's
at
nothing
least.
I can do to stop that.
I mean, to the last soldier,
But-
at least, yeah.
Yeah, but for me, I would agree that they have the right to do that. I would just argue that from my perspective, that would be silly. I would not
Your
be willing
perspective
to
is
sacrifice
wrong.
every single military age male in my own country to fight off. I would be willing to fight, but it's always a cost benefit analysis that has to be done. And I believe
Oh,
that
it's so easy to say that from from a position of safety. It's so easy to sit there in your warm home and lecture other people on what is silly and not.
the current rate of how things are going,
So
the
simple.
cost will start to highly outweigh the cost of fighting to, or
Mm.
not
Oh,
outweigh the
yeah,
cost of
for
surrender,
sure.
but outweigh the cost of negotiations.
But I
I
don't.
believe that
just,
if
I don't
It is
think that
so easy to call it a simple, mm, pros versus cons analysis.
negotiations will lead to anything. I think they're a total waste of time. Putin can leave if he wants to leave.
True.
yeah, but for example, arguing that you can't trust Russia would be like saying that you should never negotiate with the United States because of the Iran treaty, right?
Yeah,
but
well, that
I would
first
still
of all,
argue if
that would be fair. Yeah, if for example, the United States like arbitrarily invaded a country for literally no reason, the United States had state media and politicians that were openly broadcasting a desire to genocide and murder your population, stating you weren't a real country and that you belonged to them
True.
anyway. And then we came out with a list of preconditions for negotiations, which would basically involve you becoming our vassal state. I would not like pressure a country we were doing all of this to go like, come on, negotiate with us. Like, it's in your best interest. I would
True.
probably say like, yeah, obviously this is a complete waste of time. There's no reason to take any of this seriously. Like, you're being fought
True.
to annihilation here, and I think you should treat it that way.
True.
say if
Wash is correct.
the United States invaded Venezuela, which it almost did under the Trump presidency, and Russia and China started pouring weapons in, right? I wouldn't argue. I would argue that we should support the Venezuelans and that the Venezuelans are fighting the right fight and they should continue fighting and we should aid them in the fight. But I will also say that you should probably negotiate with the United States and see if you can reach terms that you are willing to agree on. I don't say that you agree with terms that are unacceptable. Obviously, you just don't agree to those terms. But I say that they should open
This
negotiations, because
already
if they don't,
happened. This sort of negotiations already happened. My God.
The States military would probably turn Venezuela into dust, and the people who currently live there, although they're not in the
Unbelievable.
best shape from before, will be in immensely worse shape after the war.
I mean, if you thought the United States was negotiating in good faith, then maybe. But outside of that, there's just no point.
Well, with the current history of the United States negotiations, wouldn't you advocate for it?
The United States doesn't advocate in or negotiate anything even approximating as bad of faith as Ukraine. First of all, we have
maybe not like, okay, so I don't think
it's
Obama
Russia.
negotiated in bad faith, but because of, you know, the Republicans existing, you can't really trust shit, right?
I don't think there's a comparison. Like
True.
like Putin is incredibly
All
honest
of those comparisons are ridiculous.
to the Republicans. There's no comparison between the two. What happened with the Iran deal was just we backed out.
Maybe not like, okay, so I don't think
it's
Obama
Russia.
negotiated in bad faith, but because of, you know, the Republicans existing, you can't really trust shit, right?
I don't think there's a comparison. Like Putin is incredibly honest compared to the Republicans. There's no comparison between the two. What happened with the Iran deal was just we backed out of a deal. That's bad, and I disagree with it, and I agree that it like undermines trust in the United States. But like it is impossible to compare this to the insane level of open dishonesty that Putin operates on at like every level. Every level of his
True.
diplomatic engagement, everything that he does is dripping with insincerity, and everyone knows it too. It's like the most well-known fact around in the intelligence communities all around the world. Like everyone knows this. They have to talk about it op-eds. Like, yeah, what does Putin do? Putin engages in
Nice.
strategic disinformation as a primary political strategy,
Yep.
where everything Russia
yeah.
does is blurred with a trillion like obvious lies that get thrown out there. And it doesn't matter if they're believable. The point is just to fill the feed with bullshit. Because that's all you really need to like dishonestly back up the conversation to the point where you can go ahead. Russia's opening terms are not acceptable to Ukraine. They're also a negotiating partner. If Russia really wants negotiations, then they need to have better opening terms. You can't blame the vendor for not wanting to do business with you if you're running around the market going like, yes, I will sell this apple for $1,000. Why will nobody negotiate with me? You're all terrible. Like, well,
True.
no. Start at a lower price.
True.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I wish Russia would do that, but with the current situation, I think that you obviously try to reduce the price as much as you can, and after a conversation, you see if it's worth it.
This already happened. This negotiation has already happened.
Like,
And
obviously,
it led nowhere. It led nowhere.
you don't need an apple, but you need the fact that your country is being annihilated. And currently, at least the eastern parts are, and to an extent, like power grids affect the whole country.
By Russia. So we
So-
have to beat Russia back.
Yes, yeah, but like you can view like Russia as some like I don't know 40k orcs or something. Like either way,
They
like,
certainly
or
want to
take
be
that
viewed that
Oh my god. A 40k fan.
way.
yeah. So like even though they are, you either have to try to fucking I don't know buy them off. You have to try something, right?
Yeah, well, we're,
Because
we're
if the only
currently trying a strategy right
Option
now.
is
Yeah. There was a negotiation. It went nowhere. Have people forgotten?
maybe Ukraine cease to exist as a historical entity. I don't think that's a good idea.
Or just wins. They could win.
True.
But what if they lose then?
If they lose, then they lose. But I don't think any other option was ever viable. And I think our responsibility is to give them the best possible shot for winning.
True.
But right now
Yeah,
they're
I
winning.
guess-
They're gaining territory.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, Russia started
guess-
rolling out the T. What was the T-54s recently?
Yeah, but that's well, So in military terms, it's not the most super important thing to like debate, but they were replacements for artillery. I saw one person argue. I haven't done like a full like multiple source reading on this, but they have to replace their
don't think-
artillery, so they're
I
using
don't
like
think you've done much reading on anything.
T-55 as a placeholder. But if they actually pull them into warfare, they will just vanish. So, I mean, yeah, I'm not saying that Russia is in like it's not the superpower that we thought, but still remember like the Russian T-90s, for example, which they still are producing, and will probably stop selling to India and use themselves instead, are some of like the good tanks that are currently being operated around the planet. I think it's first
Such
of all,
hope.
if you gamble on a complete victory or complete defeat, you can argue based on odds and consequences that it might be worth it. But I'm not that much of a gambler, so I would probably argue that
Well, it's none of your business, to be honest. You're not gambling anything. To be quite frank with you, you're just speculating on a country from a position of safety. You're not gambling anything. It's easy not to be a gambler in such a situation. Very
yes,
easy
you fight, we
indeed.
keep fighting, and we keep giving Ukraine the support it needs to continue the fight, and preferably more, because
It is very easy to be such a Schrodinger's gambler.
right now we just give them weapons to like keep the status quo more or less. But like without that, would probably be a better strategy to negotiate and see if there are ways
They're just,
to
this is,
end the war. Because
this
if
is
you
just turning to mindless slogans. Just negotiate, Farhad. Just negotiate.
want to fight to annihilation, I mean, it's heroic, but mathematically, it seems like it's the worst
Mathematically.
option.
Okay,
I think that empirically you're just like completely wrong on this.
true.
Every level of this indicates that Russia will not accept anything other than the complete conquest of Ukraine,
True.
and there is no benefit whatsoever to prolonging things. You just have to win the fight, and the fight,
True.
like so far, is going well for Ukraine. As slow and painful as it is,
Yeah.
every major like event that has taken place in the war's history has been to the benefit of Ukraine. Whether or not they
Not
can
the
win
last
completely.
month, though.
Not the last.
What?
The last month has been like skirmishing over the border. We're talking about movements on the line of conflict of like a couple of miles at most.
True.
Not like
Bloodiest battle of the war is currently ongoing and has been ongoing for a while in Bakhmut, right?
how many soldiers has Russia lost failing to take Bakhmut?
They have surrounded the city, or like strategically surrounded it.
They surrounded
technically.
Kharkiv.
Yeah, but they didn't have like a force to take Kharkiv. It's different. But for example, they haven't completely surrounded. I don't want to give false information here. They are like strategically surrounded, so they have like vision over the highways. But so for example, yeah, I mean it's a bloodbath in Bakhmut. But remember, it's also a huge amount of casualties for Ukraine, to the extent that the United States recommended them to pull out a while ago, because they would start to lose more than they gain. But probably it's for a strategic reason. They want to surround the Wagner force, probably. At least I go according to the Wagner boss, which, you know,
Defected.
trustworthiness is not the best. But yeah, like arguing for military things is hard, as we're not generals, and obviously the fog of war is really hard.
Fog of
But
war.
I like, from my perspective, if we want to argue on who wins, it's a gamble both ways. But I think Russia has the military capacity to, if not conquer like
We'll
Eastern
see.
Ukraine entirety. Yeah, we'll see.
I think Bakhmut is going well for Ukraine. On the Wikipedia page, it says that there's an estimate of around 30,000 killed and wounded from Russia. NATO estimates of Ukrainian casualties are 1/5 of that. I mean,
Yeah,
the
this
DPR
person
claims
sounds to me
more,
like
but
a
like a
sounds like a Russian shill to me.
it's
to be honest.
you know,
Yeah,
it's
but
difficult to get these wartime updates, but I don't think Bakhmut is like
yeah,
a
it's
show
impossible.
of Russian success in the Ukrainian war.
True.
It's not. It's a show of Wagner being able to get something done, but not much more than that, and at a
Because they're
huge cost.
recruiting prisoners. They're
Yes.
they're literally
Yeah.
it's literally a fucking penal legion.
Wagner is a suicide squad of led by Nazis. I mean, I'm not like arguing that it's the paragon of military might, but
Suicide Squad.
but the thing is, I guess without the like military knowledge of generals, would you agree that if the upcoming offensive ends in disaster, that is more intelligent to go into negotiations? So like varying,
Will not end
I
in
guess,
disaster.
the goal or our opinions
Totally
on
agree
the
with that.
next military move, which will be like a huge like show of force. If it fails, would you then agree
Nah,
that
0.
negotiations is a better?
I would disagree even more. Entering bad faith negotiations after one military loss after a year and a half of military victories would be a terrible idea. All it
True.
would do is make you look weak. International headlines would read about how defeat in Bakhmut, Ukraine, you know, Zelensky goes to Putin for negotiations. And then Putin would go like, hey, you know, I'll accept your total surrender. But like, there'd be no waste. I think they should
True.
triple down. More guns, more ammunition, more blood. If they lose in Bakhmut. And then if they win in Bakhmut, also more guns, ammunition, and blood.
Agreed.
Okay, so there are no ways you think that negotiations is worth having.
No, not with Putin as is.
Okay.
Putin can leave if he wants to leave. No, you laugh. That is it. That
Yes,
is the line.
Obviously, that would be fucking awesome. Yes, but you and I know that there is a 0% chance that happens so long as he lives.
Then maybe he'll kill
least.
himself, or maybe the country will
That
collapse.
would
maybe
be nice.
maybe there will be an invasion of the Kremlin by a bunch of political dissidents. Maybe the other oligarchs will see that their wealth and their international prestige is being crippled by Putin's bloodthirsty ego-mongering, and they'll have him ousted or killed. You know, things can play out in a number of ways, but I do not think there's any situation where negotiation with Russia in this state is a good road
True.
to take.
Like, this is horrible.
Well, in any state, it seems like your argument is. I mean, as long as Putin lives. But, like, unless we are lucky and the media was right that he is dying from cancer or something, like, you have to, like, exist in the situation as is. And if the, like, a lot of the Western weapons is predicating on Ukraine winning as well. So, for example, if, German Leopards are failing to perform in Ukraine as they kind of did for Turkey and Rojava, that would be probably the end of Leopards coming to Ukraine as well, because it also hurts Germany and their abilities to sell the tanks. So, like, if Ukraine fails Bakhmut, and of course I can't predict the future, this is just an analysis of the information like that I have at hand.
It's
It
not
would
an
be-
analysis. It's pure speculation. There is not an element of analysis in this. Like, analysis is not when you just start blindly guessing outcomes of things.
Be likely that Western
is not
support
an
would start to dip as
analysis.
well.
Well, then they lose. I mean, if they lose, they lose. Either way, they lose. If the situation, like if you say, well, what happens if they lose? Then they lose.
But there's a difference in how much you lose from negotiations on right now, which they can get at least pre-offensive. Like generally, like I don't know what the Russians will agree to, but you can see if you can get terms which you are willing to agree with.
I don't
But
no, I don't
in
agree.
negotiations,
There
you don't.
are
you don't
no
end-
terms that I think are acceptable. All the terms that Russia wants are just the ability to make Ukraine a vassal state. They make Ukraine
Plus, keep in mind, negotiations have already happened, and it failed.
vassal state either directly through conquest or indirectly through signing treaties that deny Ukraine the ability to have any autonomy. I don't believe there are any other negotiations that Russia will go for. So there are only two options for Ukraine here. They win completely or they lose completely. I don't think negotiations are worthwhile.
Agreed.
What do you think Ukraine should be willing to?
The things that you're calling analysis nowadays. True. I guess the analysis is like when you just guess what will happen next.
Agree with in a negotiation? Like at what terms, at what like level of like charitable terms would you agree with?
Crimea, and that's it. I think the Crimea was the portion of Ukraine that was most favorable to Russia, even when the country went independent. And trying to reconquer Crimea across those land bridges and actual bridges would be very difficult.
Yeah, be a bloodbath.
I think if they came to an agreement and it was Russia retreats entirely, Donbass, EU, NATO, the whole 9 yards for Ukraine, but Crimea remains a part of Russia, I would think that an acceptable term. Ultimately, it's up to Zelensky. If Zelensky wants to put forward, okay, we'll clear this and you can keep the Donbass as well, but we join the NATO and the EU or whatever else.
It won't happen.
That's up to him.
That
But
won't
I
happen.
think the Crimea would be an acceptable loss, as long as Ukraine was swiftly joining the EU and NATO and such later.
Yeah, and semi-autonomous region so semi-autonomy, like Donbass remains a part of Ukraine, but they have like sort of more liberty to do, for example, certain trade or
No.
something. No?
No.
It areas are conquered by Russia or they are not. No part of Ukraine, no part of something that is not Russia will be dictated to by Russia.
True.
Not dictated to, but they will have, for example, the fucking over talked about language laws or something like that.
No.
Like, hey, yo, you can speak Russian at restaurants or some shit.
You can do that in all of Ukraine.
Well, I don't remember the specific portions. Like, you can't speak Russian unless it's okay for the customer if you work at the restaurant. Was that the rule? I don't remember exactly.
No, the Russian language law was something they blew up to genocidal proportions, but it was like nothing. It was like Ukraine. Like,
Yeah,
it was
I mean,
literally
obviously-
like it was literally like if the U.S. made English like the national language.
Oh, it was beyond that, but I remember correctly, so I'm not going to argue because I might be
It
wrong.
made
and it
Ukrainian
will be better.
compulsory in a bunch of spheres of public life. Basically, like if
Yeah,
you
that's
were
what it
going to
was.
do customer service work or you going to teach or whatever else, you had to be able to speak Ukrainian. I don't
Yeah,
agree
you
with the
had to
law,
speak
by the way.
Ukrainian.
But anyway, no, I would not
No,
accept
I
an autonomous
I
region.
assume not. Yeah, because the thing, like, yeah, I guess
What is this nonsense?
in the end, this we are sort of at an impasse as we don't seem to be able to agree about exactly how much Russia is willing to give in a negotiation.
They're not giving.
I'm
too
just
much.
going by
But,
what they've said.
True. They're not.
Yeah,
willing to
but
give
what they
anything.
say as a start of negotiations has never been
I
what
will repeat it once again. Negotiations have already happened, and it went nowhere.
negotiation ends with,
Well-
right? Unless it's an unconditional surrender.
Well,
which
if
Russia won't do.
Russia is so concerned, then maybe it should adjust its negotiation strategy. I mean, like, why do we give them no
Yeah.
autonomy? It's like, okay, well, they're a force of nature, and like they're, you're
No, they're evil.
well,
I mean,
yes, but
yes,
they're also they
they're
have
fascist.
they have autonomy, and if their negotiation strategy is, haha, we won't have any conversation unless it involves you becoming our bitch, they don't really have a right to get offended if Zelensky doesn't want to entertain that conversation.
True.
No, I mean, I don't give a fuck if Russia's
I wish he would be more direct with his point. Like, what kind of negotiation? Well, that's part of the thing, isn't it?
offended. They can be offended as they want. Like, I don't think Ukraine should go into negotiations to save Russia, right? Russia isn't the one being bombed. I think they should go into negotiations in order to save Ukraine. And I think that
um, entering negotiations will lead to a lot less harm. And I also think that if Ukraine managed to get the NATO countries to end the sanctions, they could probably get a pretty favorable
Nope.
term in order for Ukraine.
Disagree.
Like
I don't.
Putin can go home and say,
Disagree.
"Hey, we left
Hard
Ukraine, but
disagree.
we
If-
won't because the sanctions are gone."
He would just
like
invade
that.
Ukraine again.
Hard disagree.
I
on
don't-
that
Yeah, but
one.
in that
Exactly.
situation, you would have NATO troops ready, or at least a fuck ton of equipment, right?
Well,
I
we
don't
already
think
have
that-
NATO troops right next to Ukraine. We have them in Poland. We didn't respond this time.
True.
Why would we respond
True.
next time?
No, but I mean, for example, lot more like the last time Ukraine started with javelins, which were highly effective, but weren't able to mount a counterattack. Later, when they got motorized vehicles, they were able to do that. I think that they should probably get, like, if they negotiate a peace, they should then have to make with terms that makes them able to defend themselves for later.
I just don't know. I don't think that's even remotely viable. So we engage in we make concessions and we engage in appeasement as a way of deterring Russia from engaging in future conflict, when all of the prerequisites that Russia requires from Ukraine for these negotiations are ones that would make future conflict for Russia way easier.
True.
Russia would never. On a fundamental level, because I feel like we're going in circles at this point, so we should probably just end this.
We
Yeah,
are.
I agree.
On a fundamental level, I think you think that Putin is a rational actor, and I think that's where we disagree. I think that
I guess that's true.
like a bunch, as is very often the case, I think that he's a power-hungry tyrant, and while authoritarian countries often act out of self-interest, like China often does, I don't think he does. I think that he's just bloodthirsty and ego-driven, and
True.
I think
I
that
agree.
there is really no way out of this without him being ousted in some fashion. And
True.
the world where we surrender, or where Ukraine surrenders or whatever, brings us farther away from that outcome than the world where they continue to fight. Because I don't
Right.
think there is a situation where Ukraine can bid for its peace without just militarily crushing Russia. I think that's the only road for them to survive.
Correct.
Well, okay. Yeah, I guess some of our disagreements is like things that are hard to like actually like factually determine. But keep in mind, I never argued for Ukraine to surrender. Only in negotiations, which they
Yeah, you
themselves
just
would.
argue for Ukraine to give something up. That's it. You don't want them to surrender. You just want Ukraine to give something up.
Be willing to agree on, but they should try to enter negotiations. But yeah, I guess we sort of went at an impasse. While I don't think your arguments are super bad, I think that I just think basically the difference is what we think Ukraine will look like after the war, and the amount of rationality that exists left in Putin's mind is also sort of what we disagree on.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how things
Well,
play out.
see you.
All the same,
Yeah, for
I,
sure.
Wouldn't want to be you.
I enjoy the conversation very much. I appreciate you coming on.
Oh, me too, a lot. And by the way, I really
not
appreciate
sure.
your advocacy. It's I started watching YouTube politics in like 2015 or something, and it was a nice time when a anarchist finally entered the space.
And anarcho-NATOists and the like. Well, we'll see how things go.
Anarcho-NATO.
We'll see how things go in Bakhmut, okay?
Wow.
Oh,
We'll see how many Russian heads get stacked up. All the same,
Yeah.
I appreciate the conversation. Thank you for coming on.
me too, and thank you for advocacy. Have a good one.
Take care.
Bye bye. Not
Take care.
sure I enjoyed it as much, but
All right, that's our Ukraine war conversation quota for like a good solid 2 months. Whew. I think it's mostly a rational actor theory thing, you know? It's the idea of like, no matter how bad things may seem, like people are always acting in what they perceive to be the best interest of their country. So there's always like an underlying logic, and I disagree. I think that in a lot of
disagree as
ways
well.
that belief can actually lead to a lot of apologia, because when bad leaders do bad things, you have to sit back and kind of wring your hands and go like, oh, okay, you know, like the Iraq War, right? I don't think people apply that to the Iraq War or like Cheney and Bush or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
you know, even the most cynical leftists will usually acknowledge that, you know, you can talk about no bid government contracts and Halliburton or whatever, but in terms of to the benefit of the country, the Iraq War most certainly was not. It didn't benefit the country. It was just an enormous waste of human
True.
life and of money, you know. But if someone was like, well, I disagree with the Iraq War, and you were like, ah, well, you know, there's a reason. He wasn't defending Putin, by the way, guys. He wasn't like pro Putin or anything. It's the belief that basically like he's a force of nature who's acting in accordance with what he believes to be the best interests of his country, and therefore like you can't do anything about that. So you have to change the factors you can control. But I don't think negotiations will lead to anything, and I think the only way forward really is basically Putin being out of power. So
So a useful idiot, in other words. That's what we call a useful idiot. Alright. That is the end of the segment. Thank you all for watching. If you've enjoyed this, press like, subscribe, the bell, and all that. Become a Patreon. Maybe become a subscriber. Maybe throw a few dollars my way. And that's it when it comes to this segment. Thank you very much. Alright. My brain has been turned too much. Well, it's been a long time, and since my throat is still not fully recovered, I think we've done a lot today. It's been like 3 hours of stream. Let's read a comment. If that's how you're supposed to start a negotiation, then there's a starting counter offer for Russia. Putin goes out the window, plus Ukrainian CCP both split Russia 50-50. True. True. So basically, we're gonna finish for today. We're gonna continue next time. I hope you have enjoyed today's stream. I will be seeing you next time, and look forward to videos that will be coming out in the near future. Okay? See you. Thank you all. Thank you all very much. And I will be seeing you on the next stream. I'm really glad that we were able to create all of the new emotes today. So bye bye, and I will be seeing all of you very, very soon. Love and solidarity as always.